Could you please explain what's going on at Brexit, because I don't understand.
Well, I'm not surprised that it didn't make a lot of sense. Let me try and distill that down to the essentials. There are two bits of a negotiation that the Brits are trying to complete with the European Commission. The first is what's called the Withdrawal Treaty, which is a relatively straightforward thing with three elements, most of which were agreed last December, which takes us out of the European Union legally, technically, formally on the 29th of March next year. The second bit is the whole future relationship that Britain will have with the European Union afterwards, so that we don't lose all the valuable things that we do together, trade and industry and everything else. Now, what's gone wrong at the moment is that one of the three elements that are essential to this withdrawal treaty is to do with Northern Ireland and a border. Northern Ireland, part of the United Kingdom, Irish Republic not, and how do we manage all that in such a way that we don't recreate a border between the north and the south, which we got rid of finally in the Good Friday Agreement, which brought to an end 30 years of appalling troubles in Ireland. Now, in Theresa May's government, she's got a number of ministers who are deeply worried about a suggestion that she and the European Commission have made, which is, look, all this backstop and all sorts of other terminology is too complicated. Why don't we just keep the Brits in the customs union for a longer period? And the problem she's got is that a number of her people are worried that if we keep ourselves in the customs union indefinitely, we may never really do Brexit. So that's why she's got a problem with her own base about how long Britain remains in the customs union and how long it keeps this transition period going.
So this is part of the difficulty I have. If they keep this going indefinitely,
yes,
as I understand it, Britain will keep paying into the European Union. They'll be subject to the restrictions of the European Union.
Yes.
The main thing they'll have changed is they don't get any say over what the European Union orders them to do. How is that a good result? I mean, the one thing I would think that the British people would be unified on is we're not going to keep paying and be subject to their rules and not actually have any input. By the way, we had a revolution about that involving Britain a long time ago.
I was going to say taxation without representation sounds familiar.
Exactly.
But it's worse than that, because not only would we keep paying and not have a seat at the table and not be able to determine what the regulations and the rules and the standards are, we wouldn't be part of the single market, so we would not have the totally frictionless trade, what we call the just-in-time supply chains, which are fundamental to a lot of British industry and the way in which we all work together. How is that a good thing, you ask? It's not. Frankly, any of these options leave the British economy worse off than we are now. The status quo equals something much better economically than what we have voted for and what we're trying to implement. And more or less everyone has accepted that, but the people who believe in Brexit think that's okay because we're taking back control, whatever that means, they're saying, in order to ensure that the UK is no longer subject to European laws and regulations.
So I'm told that there actually is a headline crossing right now, the Bloomberg, that says that the UK is dropping its demand on the Irish border as part of the EU negotiations. So I'm not sure exactly what that means to drop the demand.
I don't know what that means either, but it has been a very important point for us that we do not have either the recreation of the border between Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland, or a border between Northern Ireland and the rest of Great Britain, in other words, a border down the North Sea. The easy way around it is just to extend the amount of time we stay in the customs union. The European Commission have offered that, but for Theresa May it's problematic for some of her ministers who don't like that because they think it means that we might never leave.
So in the meantime, life goes on.
Life goes on.
When the first vote came out, people said, well, what will corporations do?
Yes.
There's no what will they do. They're doing it now. So how are companies reacting, whether it's banks, whether they're auto companies? How are companies planning their affairs?
There's a lot of uncertainty, so many of them aren't quite sure what to do. But they are planning for the UK to leave. What they don't know is whether we will leave with frictionless trade and customs union and single market still intact. Probably not, or at least in the medium term, even if in the short term we stay with very little changed after the 29th of March next year. So what's happening is that financial service institutions are moving staff and money and business out of London, out of the city, into other European capitals, which I think is a loss to the UK. Manufacturing industry is hoping that we will find a way of ensuring that just-in-time supply chains still work. If they don't, what's going to happen over a period of time is disinvestment in the manufacturing supply chains between the UK and the rest of the EU, because if we're not part of a single market and we're not able to supply all those components for auto industry, aerospace, pharmaceuticals, and so on that we do now, then many of them are going to choose to invest in their future capacity in continental Europe, inside the single market, which we will have left.